Well, good evening and welcome to our Sunday with Survivor program. My name is Thorin Tritter. I'm the Museum and Programming Director at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, which is located in Glen Cove, New York. Before we start our program this evening, I wanted to let you know about a couple of our other upcoming programs. This coming Wednesday, I'll be presenting my next Curator's Corner, one of a program that we started about a year ago to offer details about particular images and objects in our collection. This coming program on Wednesday is going to be about a photograph in our museum from a pro-Nazi rally that was held in Madison Square Garden in October of 1934. Next Monday, May 10th, we're holding our annual Upstander Award ceremony where we will honor students who have intervened during a bullying incident or an act of intolerance. And I hope that you will join us virtually to recognize really some exceptional young men and women who advocated for those in need and stood up against peer pressure. And one more program to mention, on Sunday, May 16th at 5 p.m., we are teaming up with the Richard Rodgers award-winning musical To Paint the Earth to present a virtual program of music and narration that tells the story of the life of the Jewish underground during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. To learn more about any of these programs and to see a full list of our virtual programming, please go to our website, www.hmtcli.org, and click the Events tab. Okay, on to our program tonight, and let me pull down that screen. I would like to introduce the man who's behind our Sunday with Survivor program, and that is Michael Mantell. Michael is a 3G. Two of his grandparents are survivors, and they instilled in him the need to not let their history and the larger history of the Holocaust be forgotten. Michael contacted the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center last winter to ask about arranging a survivor to speak for his own family. And after that program and some subsequent ones, we had a further conversation with him and realized this was something we shouldn't just arrange for one particular family, but to make available on a regular basis for the general public. And our Sunday with Survivor program was launched. I'm grateful for Michael's continuing support and his family's continuing interest. And I turn it over to him to offer a bit of an introduction to tonight's program. Michael?
Thank you, Thorin. Always for the great work you do on Sundays with Survivors program, and for all the work that you do and the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center does to educate people on the lessons of the Holocaust so that we can truly say never again. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. And for those who are going to be watching this recording, thank you as well. And thank you to all of our survivors who share their testimonies with us. Also, a special thank you to Sami Steigmann, who will be sharing his testimony with us today. Welcome to another Sundays with Survivors. The power of Sundays with Survivors program is that it gives people the opportunity to listen to and speak with Holocaust survivors when they may otherwise not have had the chance. It also gives survivors the opportunity to share their testimonies with people all over the world. This program was born from the idea that we must educate ourselves and others on the history of the Jewish people, the history of anti-Semitism, and the history of the Holocaust. Ironically, there is no word for history in Hebrew. Instead, we have the word memory. We commit something to memory by actively devoting ourselves to someone and something, not just one time, but over and over and over again. True memory is not cramming a lot of information in for one test at one time. It is listening, observing, researching, sharing, and teaching over time. We do not remember these testimonies by brain. We need to remember them by heart. Once something fades from our memory, it becomes history. Once it becomes history, we become detached from it. It loses meaning and relevance, and it can then be distorted, and we risk it being repeated. Sami's life isn't just his testimony, it's also part of our living memory. By bearing witness today to his testimony, we become surrogate survivors. By becoming surrogate survivors, we commit ourselves from this day forward to remembering and educating others on his life so that we can truly commit to memory what has happened so that it never happens again. As the grandson of Holocaust survivors, I am so thankful to all of the survivors who share their testimonies and to the organizations like the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center for making events like these possible. And again, thank you to everyone for being here and for those who are watching as a recording. And a special thank you to Sami. If you'd like to learn more about the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, or if you'd like to donate, volunteer, visit the center's museum, or inquire about their education and community outreach, please visit their website at hmtcli.org. And you can find out more about Sami at Sami Speaks, S-A-M-I Speaks.com. Thank you, and with that, I'll pass it back to Thorin.
Michael, that was really a lovely introduction. I don't have anything more to add. I'm delighted to share the time with Sami Steigmann. And so, Sami, why don't I ask you to open it up and start talking a little about your own testimony. So I'm going to pass it to Sami.
Well, interestingly enough, although I belong for two generations, for 68 years, I never spoke. I felt I don't belong to either one. I felt I don't belong to the Holocaust survivors because, number one, I have no memory of that period of time. And until the Eichmann trial in 1961, okay, the Holocaust survivors felt like guilty, ashamed, and like victims. And they did not want to talk to the children about those horrors because they wanted the children not to be burdened with those stories and to live a normal life. By the way, there was another trial for Nazis, the Nuremberg trial, but that was not about the Holocaust. That was to bring the Holocaust, the criminals, to justice. Later on, if you want, I can tell you more about the Eichmann trial. But I also felt I don't belong to the children of the Holocaust survivors because most of them were born in the DP camps, displaced people. Life was not easy. A lot of them had to live there for 3 to 5 years. They had no place to go. However, the threat of death did not exist. And hopefully all of you know the word bashert. It's a word in Yiddish, combination of German and Hebrew. Two things have happened that changed my life forever. Although the Holocaust Museum closed its doors for 17 years prior to me going to DC, to the general public for 2 days. It opened it up only to the Holocaust survivors, their children, and their liberators. Meant to be bashired on November 1st and November 2nd, I decided to go to DC. Although there were over 8,000 people from all over the world, at the table where I was sitting, I met a man born in the same city, been in the same camp, the same years. He was taken when he was 8 months old. I was taken when I was a year and a half. That is the difference between history and living history. By meeting him and being able to talk to him, I have decided to stop ignoring being a survivor and to do something about it. In 2007, I joined the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust in downtown Manhattan. And in 2008, March 11th, I got my first assignment to speak to 6th graders. I'm quite sure that a lot of you have spoken publicly. If you remember, your first presentation is not the best, not the most complete. I did not have a story. I did not know that I can tell a story. And I had no idea what impact I will have on such young people. Again, Bashir, they sent me thank you letters. Each one better than the other. But one 6th grader changed my life forever. She wrote, P.S. Your story was overwhelming, and I promise I'll pass your story to my children. That was the beginning. The rest is history. Let's talk a little bit about my parents. As you can see, both of their names have an H in it. My father was an orphan of both of his parents. My grandfather died before he was born. In those days, with very few exceptions, the man was the only one that provided for the family. Unable to take care of 8 children, my grandmother took the 2 youngest kids and decided to commit suicide. A stranger saved the children, but my grandmother did commit suicide. So my father grew up in an orphanage in Vienna, Austria, and at age 13, okay, he had to leave the orphanage. They did not keep him longer than that. He became streetwise. It's a different streetwise than today. That helped him during the war. It also helped him after the war, when there was not enough food to provide for the whole population. On the other hand, my mother was an uneducated woman. My grandfather had a store, did not allow her to go to school. She had to stay home, help provide for the family. Additionally, she was also abused by her stepmother. But boy, did she have a heart of gold. And when I'm talking about my parents as survivors, each survivor reacted differently to those horrors. My mother had fits of depression. My father, on the other hand, he was, in a certain way, I used to call him a benevolent dictator. But he was your best friend. But if you crossed him once, excuse me, he would never talk to you again. I remember when we lived in Israel, we lived in the 3rd floor. In the 1st floor, there was a family from Romania, and we were friends with them. And I don't know what the husband sent to my father, but my father never talked to him for the rest of his life. On the other hand, he did not prohibit my mother from going downstairs and be friends with them, visiting them, talking to them, and everything else. I know very little about life before that. All I know is that where I was born in the CZERNOWITZ, which was part of Bukovina. By the way, I was born on December 21. That Bukovina was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And in our house, even prior to that, our culture was the German culture. The emperor, Franz Joseph, was revered by the Jewish people. So when my father applied for compensation, because from his family side, from 42 people, only 2 survived. Obviously, my father and my uncle. My uncle was not a survivor. He was a refugee in one of the only 3 countries that officially accepted Jews. My uncle was a refugee in Shanghai, China. The other 2 countries were Dominican Republic and Philippines. My father used to tell me certain things about his life prior, but unfortunately, I don't really remember. I did not write it down. I used to have a phenomenal memory, so I thought it will last forever. But interestingly enough, I believe that he was in the Romanian military, and apparently in the cavalry. And he was not a regular soldier, probably because he knew how to read, write, arithmetic, He probably was in the administrative role. He had one. So I don't think that life was too difficult for him. Now, interestingly enough, in 1941, the Romanians took over the Bessarabia and Bukovina. That was a part of the former Soviet Union, the western part of Ukraine. And the northern side, okay, the area was taken by Poland, and that area was called Galicia. Because that area was annexed by the Romanians, we were reported by the Romanians and not by the Germans. And we were sent to an area called Transnistria, and the name of the camp was Mogilev Podolsk. If you will show me the map. By the way, yes, in the map, you can see that everything in white, including the one on the left side, okay, the Transylvania, that was part of Romania. Interesting enough, we were born in Czernowitz, outside of Romania, and you can see the arrow where it was the area of Transnistria, Mogilev Podolsk. Okay, one of the things is I want everybody to understand, and if you want, you can go back to the previous slide, okay? I want you to understand that the Germans were not the only bastards. So were the Italians, the French, the Ukrainians, the Poles, the Lithuanians, everybody. Interestingly enough, the Romanian troops, for an act of sabotage, as a reprisal, okay, they took 19,000 Jews from Odessa and burned them alive. As a Holocaust survivor, I will never understand the inhumanity of men towards men. Okay. Okay. We talked about this one. Okay, as you can see here. Okay, this is the 6th grader. Now, when I am talking, yes, you see, P.S., your story was overwhelming. We talked about it. Now, I also wanted to understand that I'm not just a victim of the Holocaust. I'm also a victim of persecution, anti-Semitism, discrimination after the war. I am not just a survivor of the Holocaust, I'm also a survivor of life challenges. And later on, I will give you 2 examples, okay, of difficult challenges. And I do not want you to feel sorry for me. I just want you to learn how I overcame, and under no circumstances should you ever give up, should you ever lose hope. Now, I see here a very interesting slide. I was in pain all my life, and I will be in pain all my life. What happened is they could not find a cure in my particular case because my pain is head, neck, shoulder, and back. And it's constantly moving from place to place. And the intensity can be an 8 or 9, or can be a 2 or 3. Usually it's 3 and 4. You will not see it on my face because I have a very high pain tolerance, and I'm also part of the generation that was and is very stoic. Okay, when we will not show it to you. For about 31 years, even the doctors, even longer, the doctors did not believe in time and pain because there are no tests to prove that you have a backache. You have to show it. And because I did not show it, they did not really believe me that I'm in pain. But there was something that happened that all of a sudden I realized that I was subjected to medical experiments. In 1971, my parents came to visit me to Milwaukee. And one day, They went out and they came back unexpectedly, and I was on the floor, almost unable to move. My father was in complete shock. He never knew that I'm in pain. And apparently, inadvertently, because of the shock, he mentioned to me that I was subjected to medical experiments. Obviously, it did not help me with the pain, but it gave me the courage to ask for compensation. As all of you know, nobody will pay you unless you know what happened to you, if you have documents or you have witnesses. In my particular case, obviously the doctors did not come to my parents and tell them this is what they did to your son. They did not know. I don't know. When I applied in February 8th in 2002, okay, I was homeless. Obviously, I did not have documents. And by that time, I had no witnesses also because even my parents were gone. Okay. To my surprise, I got an answer. I did not expect it, to be honest. But to my shock, next slide. To my shock, I got paid. And the Germans did not want to pay if they could get away with it. And interestingly enough, you can see in yellow, there are two things. On the top, it says, based on the information and evidence you provided. What evidence? Your eligibility has been established as a victim of medical experiments. Please remember one thing. In 2013, I read two articles. One was in New York Times. One of them was in Daily Mail in London. And to my complete surprise, it stated that the Nazis and their collaborators had 42,500 different types of camps. So it was based on their records, not on what I wrote. Okay. The other paragraph that it says there that the German government admitted that they did medical experiments not only in Germany, but in other countries too, and that I was one of them. I have a tendency to take a negative and turn something into something positive. For 7 years in a row, I was invited to go to speak to seventh graders in Bayonne, New Jersey, to 735 students. On May 6, 2015, a reporter was there and wrote a very nice article. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, the neo-Nazis in New Jersey picked up that article word by word. But they changed the headline. It took me approximately 2.5 to 3 months to realize it, and that simple headline, they called me 3 times a liar. Jew, Holocaust. Holocaust, made after Holocaust, hoax. Hoaxes never happened. So if it never happened, how can I talk about it? Obviously, I'm a liar. Claims Nazi medical experiment, he can't remember. That is a true statement, but they don't explain why I don't remember. It still causes them pain. Also a true statement. Okay, but they don't explain why, so they just use innuendos. Also what they say, unlike the millions of other Jew hoaxes, somehow was not experimented by Joseph Mengele. Number one, millions of people were not experimented. Millions of people are not liars. And if you don't know who Mengele was, he was the angel of death, separated who will live, who will die. And as a doctor, he had only one interest. Those were twins. He was in Auschwitz, he was never in Europe. So was upset, I would say, I don't think I'm exaggerating, probably for about half an hour, maybe a little bit more. And then I decided to turn this against them. And I use today that particular article that was posted on the internet 2 days later, and to teach the young people to do the research. The internet is a wonderful tool. Okay, a lot of very good information, but it's also a very powerful tool to spread hatred. One thing that I want to say before we can, if you want, you can ask a few questions about what I talked before, but I want to stress something. We have to become upstanders. We have to stand up to lies. And I'll talk more about it later, but I just want to quote Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda under Hitler. He said, "A lie told long enough becomes truth." Okay.
Thanks very much, Sami. And I know that you wanted to encourage people to make this a discussion and pose questions rather than presenting longer. And so I'm going to, as Michael already put into the chat, encourage people, if they have questions, to please submit them through the Q&A window. And I know Michael has some questions, but maybe just as a starting point, just to ask you to go back a little. So you said you were born in Romania, or in what became Romania, and during the war, the Romanians deported you and your parents to Transnistria. What happened to your parents after the war, or how did they survive in Transnistria, and then where did they go after that?
What happened is in the camp in Transnistria, they were basically slaves, and you would think that it was not so bad. Things were very bad. Like anything that would happen during those days was terrible. Okay, not in my particular case. If you, I'm alive today because I was lucky 3 times. And if you will ask any survivor, how come you're alive today? Everybody will use only one word, and that is luck. There is no rhyme. There is no reason why somebody lived, somebody died. In my particular case, I was never separated from my parents. I was subjected to medical experiments. Okay, that's one of the reasons that I suffered all my life and will suffer for the rest of my life. And not far away from the camp, there was a farm owned by Germans. And I teach young people not to stereotype. The woman brought food to the guards in the SS. And there came a time that I was dying of starvation. And there are physical signs: big head, swollen stomach, swollen feet. And here it is, a German woman. So a strange Jewish kid, dying of starvation, had compassion and decided to give me milk. People like her are called the righteous among the nations. And we have to understand the courage of those people, because she did not risk only her own life. She risked the life of her entire family. It's relatively easy to make a decision when only your life is at stake. I do not know her name. I was never able to honor her. However, in 2014, I was in Israel to give testimony at Yad Vashem. And next to the museum, excuse me. Next to the museum, there is a garden honoring 27,000 non-Jewish people that saved Jews. And there was one thing that made me very happy. I saw a marker honoring the unknown righteous among the nations. So indirectly, the woman that saved my life has been honored, and they gave me the peace that I needed and everything else. Once the camp was liberated in 1944, we were somewhere in the former Soviet Union for about 2 years. And because we were deported by the Romanians, my father was born in Romania proper. Okay, the Romanians allowed a small group of Jews, I believe about 3,000. And being an anti-communist, he decided to choose the lesser of two evils. And he decided to go back to Romania. For whatever reason, he settled in Transylvania. So you just met the Jewish Dracula. And we lived in a very small town. Only 26 years ago, I found out it became a city. But there were a number of Jews over there, and it was a fairly good life, fairly. Under a communist country, you know, you have to say fairly, because a lot of people do not know what a communist or a socialist country is. Okay, and if interested, I can talk about it. The first time that I actually felt free is in 1961, when the whole family went to Israel. Then I served in the Israeli Air Force. And in 1968, when I came to the United States.
Well, you might inspire some questions there. I'm going to pass it over to Michael to handle the rest of the questions, I think. But let me just lead off with one more, and that is, I know, Sami, when I've heard you speak in the past, there are a couple of main points that you always try to convey about misconceptions people have about the Holocaust, or that you think people have about the Holocaust. Do you want to just share some of those thoughts with us?
Yes. One of the things that I want to say is that I've spoken to about 150,000 young people, schools, campuses. And I found out that the Jewish young people, even college students, and had families that went through the Holocaust. Number one, do not know the evolution of the Holocaust. It did not happen suddenly. And number two, have no spiritual connection to the state of Israel. And I just want to say something very important. And let's remember, during the Holocaust, Jews died because they did not have a country. Recently, we commemorated Yom HaShoah, the national Holocaust memorial. And on Yom HaShoah, no, not Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron. And this is the National Memorial Day. On Yom HaZikaron, we remember the people that died for us to have a country. Okay, and also Israel is the only Jewish state in the world. And I want to stress the importance of the state of Israel for the Jewish people all over the world. In 2014, okay, in France, the anti-Semitism and violence reached certain heights. And in 2015, and I want you to understand the importance of the state of Israel, over 8,000 French Jews decided to go to find a safe haven. And the safe haven was and is the state of Israel. The Holocaust for me is not a Jewish issue. For me, it's a universal issue. 11 million people were murdered. Yes, 6 million were Jews, but 5 million were non-Jewish people. And in my particular case, the story that I tell, I don't want it to be about Sami. I want to learn the lessons that we can learn from it, and to recognize the signs of today, to be able to stand up to it, to prevent other tragedies in the world. But when I'm talking about education, and it's very dismal in this country, and I can explain it to you, I can give examples. But education to me is not remembering that so many people were murdered. Is to understand how is it possible that ordinary people, Germans from other countries, scientists, doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses, found it not only acceptable, they actually found it required to annihilate one group of people. And that's what it means to me, education. The other thing is, I don't know if everybody knows, there are three groups that are called Semites: Jews, Arabs, and Ethiopians. But when they use the word anti-Semite, they use it only against the Jewish people. And we have to be very careful not to put two things together. Genocide and Holocaust are not the same. Anti-Semitism and hatred are not the same. They are totally two different things. Okay, concentration camps and BP camps are not the same. We cannot lump them together, which a lot of our leaders do. And I also find it very disturbing that Jewish leaders, okay, are not fighting for our values, for the Jewish people. We are willing to fight for everybody. And we do. And it's wonderful. When are we going to start to fight for ourselves, for the Jewish people? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. We did have a follow-up question. Someone asked specifically, how does a person, or how would you respond to anti-Semitic comments?
That's a very good question. There are two things in this country that I'm very unhappy. Number one, people have forgotten how to disagree in a civil way. And number two, if you watch the news, nobody is responsible for anything. Always somebody else's fault, circumstances. This is the wrong lesson to teach the next generation. And let me give you an example. I believe in a dialogue. When I was at the UC Berkeley, I found out that a Christian Lebanese student had very strong negative feelings towards the state of Israel and had a very large Muslim and Christian following. I was wondering if he would be willing to talk to me. To my surprise, he said yes. As I was sitting in, I was drinking coffee, we were drinking coffee. When I asked him, why do you feel so strongly against the state of Israel? I made sure that even facially, I did not give him the opportunity to misinterpret that I am confrontational. And the way you treat somebody, that's the way they will treat you. And we respected each other's opinion. And after about 45 minutes, we shook hands. And I said, look, you're lumping together two things that are not equal. If you are against the Israeli government's policy, you have my blessing. But the state of Israel has done nothing to you. Can you separate the two issues? And because it was not confrontational, because we respected each other's opinion, we listened to each other, he said yes. And that's what I'm trying to say is we have to learn, okay, to have a dialogue and not be confrontational. The other thing that I will say, I will not talk to somebody that has a closed mind. You're not going to change their opinion, they're not going to change yours. On the other hand, okay, I would love to talk to people that have an open mind. And I'll give an example. I was at the Bayonne Community College. And during my presentation, a Palestinian student got up and asked a question, I don't remember exactly, but it would be like, why did the Israelis murder 200 Palestinians. Just something in that genre. There is no context. When, where, why, what precipitated it. And I try to redirect the conversation in different areas and to show that they have different perspectives, different viewpoints. He always came back with the same question. Finally, I said, you know something, let's agree that we disagree. After my presentation, one student came to me and she said, I did not know that. And I felt that I succeeded. Here was a person with an open mind that is willing to do the research. So I am today not trying to change everybody, but if I succeed with one person, I feel that I succeeded. And I can say proudly that I succeed with more than just one person. But I felt that I succeeded. One person came to me and said, I did not know that, willing to do the research.
It was very well stated, thank you. And I like how at the end you make sure that we understand that there are other people who are present, not necessarily just the person we are speaking with, but sometimes we have an audience.
By the way, I just want to make a comment. If anybody knows about the Clubhouse, somebody raised for me to answer questions. Okay, I was there for 16 hours. If you go on my the website, you will see the 2 articles. 16 hours straight, answering questions. Very interesting. I
actually just read about that in an article that you went for 16 hours on Clubhouse, and there was, I think, 1,000 people overall in the audience, or something.
They were over 10,000. Yes.
That's amazing. Yeah. So from the very beginning, speaking with a 6th grade class up until I think that was last year, or that was even this year, right? The Clubhouse event.
And that's what I'm saying. In every calamity, there is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Here is, for instance, I live by myself in Manhattan. And for practical purposes, with few exceptions, I basically was on house arrest. But I want everybody to remember, there is a virus that is much more dangerous. And that is the virus of bigotry, bullying, anti-Semitism, hatred, racism, and ideology. It cannot be eradicated. The only way that they can combat it is to be united and through education only. We have to educate the next generation. Okay, it's their world.
Thank you. That actually leads us into another great question. So I'll read that. I teach 7th and 8th graders world history. I teach 7th and 8th graders world history. Beyond research and remembering your story, how can we best honor your legacy? Thank you for that question. That's pretty great.
Well, look, for instance, being in my apartment all by myself all that time, I found 2 things that changed my life. Number one is Zoom. I've been able to connect with people from all over the world. Then I found all of a sudden, never heard of it. I would have never known unless somebody told me, the Clubhouse. So there are many new opportunities. And let me give you 2 examples. Number one, when I was in the shelter, it was the first time that I was a broken man. I did not want to live. I was also an extremely heavy smoker, about 3 packs a day. And I decided to test my will to live. And I said, when I will quit smoking, cold turkey, I will recover. I did not say I will try. I will try is not a commitment. I said I will. December 13th, 1996. If you're superstitious, Friday the 13th. I had my last cigarette. So it's very important, okay, to see that an optimist like I am, and for a very long time I could not put it in words, but an optimist sees in every problem an opportunity. Unlike a pessimist sees in every opportunity a problem. And one thing, I hope that there are in the audience also young people. I want for them to understand something. All of us have failed and will fail. But you are not a failure, okay, just because you failed. In my book, you are a failure only if you don't try. And you can Google it. And I found out that there was one person, an author of children's book, was rejected 473 times. Today, she's worth over $10 million. I don't know if you saw the movie Hobbit. Was rejected 61 times. The person, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, was rejected 12 times. So do me a favor, okay? Even if you fail, do not think of yourself as a failure. You will be a failure only, in my book, only if you don't try.
Thank you. So there's more questions about your experiences after the Holocaust. I didn't know if you want to talk more about it or if I should just go into some questions. Did your parents ever talk with you about their experiences during the Holocaust? And I just want to remind everybody that you were in the camps between, I think you were 1.5 years old and then liberated or before about 4 years old, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so did your parents share with you their experiences, and did they even share with you what they knew about your experience since you were so young?
Very little. The one thing that they shared with me, okay, is that the winter in Ukraine is bitterly cold. For a loaf of bread, my father gave away his winter coat. All of the parents, I'm using my father as an example, they had to function. Number one, they had to fight to survive. But at the same time, they also had to fight to save their children. The other thing is that my father told me, okay, and obviously I don't remember, that the German woman who brought me milk, when she saw that I got a little color on my face, she used to give me a knip like this, okay? That's called a knip. And she used to say, those are my rosy cheeks. So, but they did not talk about what happened to them. There is also a misconception that the Nazis did not talk. That's not true. They did talk, but not what they did, what happened to them. Okay, so we have to be very careful when we use certain words, okay, because they have meanings, okay, and if you don't use the proper words, you are going to perpetuate false narratives, and that's happening in Israel, that's happening here in the United States, and I'll just give 2 examples in the United States, and if you want, I can also give you with Israel. But somebody said, by the way, I don't attack people, I attack only what they say. Somebody said that there are concentration camps in this country. That is a lie. Like I said, life in the DP camps was not easy, but the threat of death did not exist. Please do not make any comparisons to what's happening today to what happened in the past. Somebody else said, another leader of our country said that Holocaust is happening in the world. That is also a lie. Genocide, yes, but there's a difference between genocide and Holocaust. Genocide is the murder of a group of people. Holocaust was the annihilation of a group of people. And to understand, once they were going to murder all of the European Jews, the Nazis wanted to open up a museum. That's why they're very good at keeping records, artifacts, and everything else. They were going to call the Museum of the Extinct Jewish Race. And something that very few people know. Jews were never known as a race. We were known as a nationality, as a religion, never as a race. You cannot annihilate a religion, a nationality, but you can eradicate a race, annihilate it. And the Nazis were the first ones that coined the Jews as a race. Now you understand the importance, why they did it, and that they wanted to open up a museum. We're going to call it the Museum of the Extinct Jewish Race. I believe very few people know that.
I agree. I think very few people know that. There are other questions. So you mentioned your uncle, I believe this was your father's brother, who was a refugee in Shanghai. Do you know about the stories of other family members, or what happened to other family members during the Holocaust, or which journeys they took to avoid?
I think I know of two of them, Uncle David and Tante Fanny, that were murdered in Auschwitz. Somebody else that was somewhere in the former Soviet Union, but I don't know exactly how he died, where it happened, where he was, or something. I don't remember. My parents, look, they wanted the children to grow up a normal life. Only when I started to speak for the first time did I realize that my childhood was not a normal childhood. And I'll give you an example. When I started to speak, it's for the first time, I realized that I was an emotional parent to my parents. No child should feel that way. And to understand what I'm talking about is when my parents wanted to go and to meet somebody, to be with somebody. And if they wanted me to accompany them, I would give up my friends because of the empathy, and I would go with them. Okay? My sister, on the other hand, just a child of Holocaust survivor, she was born in 1946 on the way from the former Soviet Union to Romania. We came through Sighet, where Elie Wiesel was born. And she said, you want to go? Go by yourselves. I'm going with my friends. So you have to understand that children of the Holocaust survivors also had issues to deal with. And in a joking way, I'm saying that I'm blessed. I had to deal with both of them. As a Holocaust survivor, also as a child of Holocaust survivor. But until I started to speak, I did not know anything else. So I was not really, to be honest with you, I was not aware of it.
And so you did mention your sister. She was born in 1946. So she was just a child of Holocaust survivors. She was not in the Holocaust herself. You mentioned your uncle and your father's brother. Is his name Max?
Yes. So I met him. What happened is when Mao Zedong, when the communists came to power, he decided to go to Israel, speaking English. He worked for the American Embassy in 1952. He came to the States and settled in Santa Barbara. And it's a long story. I don't know if we have time, But anyways, when I came in 1968 to the United States, one of the goals was to meet him. Okay, and yeah. And by the way, the Chinese were able to save 25,000 Jews. They could not save more because China was invaded by Japan, and the Japanese were more cruel to the Chinese than to the Jewish people, actually. In Dominican Republic, it was less than 500 people, but okay, difficult to know the exact number. But interestingly enough, they could not save more because to go to Dominican Republic, you have to go through the United States, and we entered the war in 1941. And in Philippines, they saved 1,200 Jews.
You did mention earlier about experiencing anti-Semitism after the Holocaust. Can you talk more about your experiences in Romania or in Europe after, what that was like?
Yes. When people take a lot of things for granted, especially the young people, they have no idea how life was before. They have no idea about Israel. In Israel was a marsh. There was nothing there. When we came to Cologne in 1961, 1962, okay, as far as the eye could see, there was only sand. The Poles would not hire a Romanian, okay? The people from Ashkenazim, from Europe, looked at the people from the Sfaradim and Israel, and they used to call them barbarians. They used to look at us and they used to call us barbarians. People do not understand. They see Israel today. They don't understand the history of it. They don't have the spiritual connection to it, okay, to understand what Israel really means. What was the question?
Yeah, so your experiences after the Holocaust in Romania, before moving to Israel, yeah.
Okay. To give an example, I belong to the Bnei Akiva. It's a Jewish, religious, Zionist organization. As soon as I came to Romania, my father put me in that organization. So obviously, growing up religious, I did not write on Sabbath. Some of the other kids did. And they forced me in Romania, okay, there was no promotion to the next grade if you failed one particular subject. And the manual work was on Saturday. And we had to do certain things. And I did not want to do it. It was prohibited according to my religion. And they said that if I'm not going to do it, they will fail me on that subject. And if they would fail me on that subject, I would not be promoted. I would have to take the next year the same class. So they tried to intimidate me, anti-Semitism. So I knew a lot of the things. So I'll give you another example. There was not enough food to feed the population. We used to go to farms and steal watermelon. It has water, sugar, gives you energy, and it's food. We used to steal fruits, okay? But not when they were ripe, because the owner would come and beat us up when they were still green. And the green fruits had a sour taste. So even today, I would eat a Granny Smith, but very seldom would I eat any other type of apple. We used to go to forest to pick up strawberries, raspberries, gooseberries, mushrooms. People, I don't know if they know or not, but the good mushrooms and the poison mushrooms live together. Fortunately, my mother knew the difference. In the house, we did not have a sink. We had to walk for about half a mile, okay, to the well. We didn't have a toilet. We had outhouses in schools. We did not have a gym. Everything was done in the courtyard. People do not understand, okay, but because everybody lived under the same conditions, okay, we did not feel that we were discriminated economically. We were discriminated as being Jews. I apparently do not look what people imagine a Jew is supposed to look like. So people used to come and tell me all kinds of stupid jokes and about the Jews and everything else. And I said, you know who you're talking to? I'm Jewish. I was very proud. And they said, oh, no, I'm not meaning you. I mean, the others. And I try to teach the young people. We hate people because we don't know them. We don't know them because we hate them. There is no reason in this day and age, okay, to hate. Hate is a learned process. It can be unlearned. That is part of the education. Why did they did not hate me? Because they knew me.
And so we have another question, and I was just about to ask one, and they sort of tie into each other. You said you went to Israel in 1961, but from what I learned, I believe your father applied in 1947. So it took over, I'm sorry, 1949. So it took over a decade. So obviously there was this plan. I'm sorry?
12 years.
Yeah, so there was this plan to go to Israel, apparently. Somebody asked, what is the impact of being both a refugee and a Holocaust survivor? And I would assume, in a sense, by your father attempting to leave Europe, in a sense, there was this sense of being a refugee. So what was that like?
Well, my father was a Zionist. Mm-hmm. As a Zionist, okay, Israel was our own homeland. Like for instance, okay, we are indigenous to the state of Israel, to that land. It's our homeland. We have to understand that. Like Greeks are coming from Greece. Italians are coming from Italy. Jews are coming from Judea. We have to use the word Judea and Samaria. We don't have to use what our enemies are calling it West Bank. Okay, you know what I'm talking about.
West Bank, yep.
West Bank, yes. Even our leaders in our country, the Jewish leaders, perpetuate false narratives and use West Bank instead of using the word Judea and Samaria. Why? Let the enemies say whatever they want to say. It's a free country. But we have to say, okay, what we believe in. We don't have to be afraid. Okay, we are too laid back. Okay, come on, let's become active. Let's fight anti-Semitism. It's rising its head worldwide. We have to demonstrate. It's not sufficient, through social media and everything else. Okay, I identify with the BLM movement, not with the organization, which is anti-Semitic. But with the movement, take a look what they did. They started marching nationwide. They attracted other people to join them. The media was there. Everybody's talking about it. Why can't we do the same thing? Okay, I want to see how many other ethnic groups that we help will help us. Okay, fight anti-Semitism. We are too laid back.
So you it sounds like your family moved to Israel because of being Jewish and being Zionist. When you were there,
I think not only Jewish. I think because he was Zionist.
They were Zionists, and
we believed, and my father believed, we believed that the Jewish people have the right, okay, to have their own country, their own state, and to determine our own future. Throughout our history, okay, our future was determined by other people, was not determined by us.
And while you were there, you served in the Israeli Air Force, correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, imagine yourself, okay, here's a Jewish young man, Holocaust survivor, coming to Israel, our homeland, for the first time, breathing freedom. Okay, and I walk in the street and I see a Jewish policeman. That was a wow. And when I served in the Israeli Air Force, I was 22 years old. And do you know what the young people, the other soldiers, 17, 18 years old, called me? Michael?
I know, but I don't want to ruin it for other people.
Okay. They used to call me Saba. Saba means grandpa. Here at age 22, I was a grandpa. Okay. And the young kids, it's unreal. It's unimaginable. The young kids working on the most sophisticated airplanes and equipment and the trust that the country has put on that. It's unimaginable. It's unbelievable. Difficult to put in words. The pride that you feel and everything else.
I think I see that we've gone past our hour, but I wanted to let Michael get to some of those other questions. But Sami, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your memories, your history, and your thoughts with us. Michael, I want to thank you also for being our host and for posing these questions and for being so instrumental behind the scenes as well. I thank everybody who's been joining us, and I hope you'll join us for some other programs that are coming up and our next Sunday with Survivors, which will happen in June. But thank you, Sami, once again for sharing so much with us.
Thank you, Torin. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the HMTC, okay, for hosting it. And if anybody wants to know more about it, wants to get in touch with me, okay, please feel comfortable. I'm more than happy to answer.
Can I just ask one last question before we head out? Is that okay, Thorin?
Of course.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we did run out of time. I just want to ask you, just because you talk about the lessons from the Holocaust, and I think just to leave off on that, I know you mentioned before what lessons we should take from this. But also I wanted to ask you, essentially, how do you not lose hope after going through something like that?
No. Today, I do not practice my Judaism. Okay, I grew up religious, Sabbath and everything else. I'm Sabbath, for instance. If you're religious, and if you know, okay, you cannot even carry the keys in your pocket. Okay, there's certain things that, I used to do all of those things. When my son was in my life, I did practice it because I believe teaching by example. But today I live alone. I don't cook. Okay, whatever it is, I don't practice it. I'm not a hypocrite. I don't pretend to do something that I don't do. And but that has nothing to do with the Holocaust.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
It was a personal decision that I made it because I'm alone today. But on the other hand, a lot of the survivors became agnostic because they said, how could God allow something like that to happen? Other people, because the miracle of the state of Israel and the miracle that they survived, okay, became very religious. And I used to believe in coincidence. And interestingly enough, since I became homeless and I started to speak since 2008, things have moved in such a rapid succession from good, better. I mean, unbelievable. And today, I am a believer and meant to be.
And that, I think, answers it perfectly. Just a believer in things that are meant to be. I think it's a beautiful way to end it. Thank you. Really appreciate that.
And thank you for all the audience.
And thank you again to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. You guys are wonderful. I really appreciate everything you do.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.